Oh, I'm on. Good morning, subscribers, and welcome to my channel once again for another exciting video. And again, this one is about annuals, comic annuals. And today we have two for the price of one. Yes, that's right, I'm going to review two similar annuals. Now, if you've watched the previous ones or videos that I've done on annuals, you'll remember I looked at the Eagle annual, and then from the same stable we looked at the Swift annual. And I mentioned, I think in both of those videos, that there was a third annual that was done by the same company, and that was for ladies, for girls, or the older children, if you like, I think. And this annual was called, or this comic was called, Girl. And we have Girl here. Don't worry about these post-it notes, they're in there for a purpose. So we're going to have a look at annual 1 of Girl, and we're going to compare this with another annual from this, actually from the same year. So this started in 1951. So this was number 1, as I said, and at the same time, or the same year, this annual came out as well. Girls Crystal, and it's actually got the year on there as well. So we're just going to draw some comparisons between the two annuals. Now, although we're going to review two annuals, I'm going to spend more time on Girl, because the content is far more well, there's far more content in here, as far as like a diverse set of stories, etc., and information, and it's far more interesting, I think, than the Girls Crystal. But it's an interesting comparison, really, to see how these comics and annuals actually developed over a period of time. So with the Girls annual, it's very, very similar in some ways to the Eagle annual, and I was quite surprised when I got hold of this, because I hadn't seen or hadn't read this kind of annual, obviously being a young man at the time, but I didn't know what to expect when it arrived, when I bought it and it actually came through. I thought maybe it would be kind of full of let's say of the period, more things that a girl should be informed about, as far as depicting how their career or how their life will span out. Because as far as the schools was concerned, as far as young ladies were concerned, their education was based around the fact that they would become housewives, and they were taught things like cooking and needlework and sewing, etc. Domestic science, as they called it. And they also did typing, because it was deemed that they would probably become secretaries or typists in some form. But the main aim was that, of course, they would become housewives. So when this turned up, I thought there would be much, much more content in here about pushing them towards that side, if you like. Information about maybe cookery, sewing, knitting, etc. That sort of thing. But I was pleasantly surprised that that wasn't the case. In fact, it draws a lot of comparisons, as I say, with the Eagle annual, in as far as how it kind of encourages the young ladies of that time to go out and explore and push themselves. So I think we'll see some of that content as we actually go through this annual. As I said, we will look at Girls Crystal, but not in as much detail. A nice annual though, a nicely bound annual with a lovely picture on the front, but its content is completely different. Anyway, let's get started and have a look at the pages of Girl first. Here we are then with the Girl Annual and volume number 1. Great news strip, stories, articles. Similar format really to the Eagle Annual, same colours, and a similar sort of kind of design really throughout, but obviously with the emphasis on the young lady. And this particular annual has had a lot of colouring in by the person who initially owned this book. As you can see, she liked to draw quite a bit, and it says this book belongs to Gillian Beckley. And in my time, at least for me, I was certainly taught not to write in any books at all, but not the case in this particular instance. She liked to colour in and draw. So even the contents page, I don't know what she's been doing here, but she's possibly read these articles several times and each time has ticked the article that she's read. But a similar format, and I suspect some of the artists also were employed on this particular annual as they were on Swift and Eagle. So typical format story. This one's called Stage Fright. Of course, these stories would involve girls or ladies, predominantly I would say ladies rather than young girls. Nicely drawn, and we come to our first, what you'd call a strip cartoon, Flick and the Vanishing New Girl. Our owner has coloured in or has reshaped this lady's hair. For some reason she kind of has a thing about long hair and has drawn long hair on these cartoon models. A detective story, a mystery story, but involving a young lady, I would say, in this particular instance. So it moves away from children in certain situations and is now depicting the older girl, really, the older teenager probably. Nicely drawn and very, very similar artwork to the Eagle. Another story here, Topsy saves the game. In this particular instance, again it's a young lady, this time clambering up a drain pipe. Oh, and there's some tennis here. So it's always the heroine in this instance is always obviously a lady. Our first colour strip, this one's Captain Starling, and was one of the main features in the comic. Again, in a similar style to Dan Dare in as far as the colour palette's concerned, but I understand this was a different artist used on this cartoon. And we come to quite an interesting feature here, one of three I think, regarding women that have actually had success in sport. So this story is about Jeanette Altwig, who was Britain's Olympic gold medalist in ice skating. So like the Eagle, this annual tries to kind of put forward to the young reader who's reading this the concept that, you know, if you do well in sport, you can reach quite a height in your career, even for women of that certain period. So it demonstrates certain women that have done very, very well. So the story of Jeanette and some images of what she got up to. Then we have a story about, it's kind of a cartoon story about candy, about sugar cane and how it's used, and there are some recipes in here along the way as to how you might make some chocolates and sweets out of sugar. We'll flip over a few of these stories because there's just too many of them to actually mention here. A story relating to weather sayings, the truth about weather sayings, and there's a whole list of typical weather sayings of the day. How Betty trained her puppy, a story relating to a puppy and how you might look after it. I would guess young ladies of that time, like young men, would have a pet in the home, and that's a story. That was the story about looking after your puppy. A nice article here, rub up your history, about going out and doing some brass rubbings from churches. That's something that children used to do way back, is go to certain places and produce a rubbing from, I guess, some sort of frieze or something like that that would be depicted in a church. It's a way of actually making an image, a copy. And a nice story here, I kind of read some of this, but again it's instilling into the young lady a sense of you know, what you could do as a job a little bit further out from being a typist. I mean, this young lady here is typing, and the story is about a continuity girl that works for a TV company, and it kind of goes into quite a lot of detail here about how TV programs are made and the importance of the continuity girl who works within the studio and what she needs to do. So it's educating for employment, really. Susan follows the clothesline, a colour strip article about clothes through the ages. Very nicely drawn, and the colour palette is very, very similar again to the Eagle. We march on through. So, as with the Eagle, you would get a cutaway drawing of how something works, and for the young lady this was inside a sewing machine, so it showed how a sewing machine works. And another story relating to ballet dancing, and in this particular story our owner has coloured in quite a bit. Even on the colour prints she's actually coloured in parts here. Some nice colour plates in the centrefold. And we move over. So this particular story here, this is a real life story about the Rowe twins, Britain's young table tennis stars. Again, these two ladies were champions in table tennis at the time, so it details their story. This is all good, really good reading for the ladies at the time, who tended to be railroaded into kind of a very narrow set of options after school. A nice story relating to Gracie Fields, Our Gracie it's called, and very nicely drawn and detailed story about her and how she used to sing to the forces in World War II. Another comic strip, this one is Lettuce Leaf, Crime at St Aldridge's. Aldridge's? Yes. And the final story here, I was going to show you Girls of the ATA. A story relating to the young women during World War II that used to deliver aeroplanes from the factories during World War II. Not just Spitfires, but also quite large bombers. So just to show that women in the workplace could do literally anything. If you put your mind to it, you could work in any type of industry, and that was really good news for the time. So, as I already said, we're going to have a look at Girls Crystal Annual from the same year, 1951. I understand this comic came out initially in 1935, so the comic started a lot earlier than the Eagle and Girl comics. So it had been established for some time. So, but I wanted to get 1951 to compare with the Girl Annual. Very, very nice, as I've said before. Plate on the front picture depict, and it always depicted a young lady of some sort doing something in an adventuresome sort of kind of setting. Very colourful. If you saw this on the bookshelves, I would guess you would want to buy this. But the inside, the content inside goes from kind of full colour here to a little bit of ordinariness, really. I did look at the price here. It says 6 shillings and sixpence. If you can see that, yes. 6 shillings and sixpence. I looked up what that might be today in today's money. That would equate to about £10 actually. Maybe that was quite expensive for the time, I'm not sure. It's certainly a thicker annual than Girl, but the page sizes are smaller. Another colour plate here of some young ladies in a skiing scene, and then it really does go to black and white after this. So a contents page, and then it goes full blast into these stories. A little bit like some of the stories in Eagle and Girl. They tend to revolve around perhaps some criminal activity, and a lady or young lady kind of solving some sort of mystery, let's say. The stories are quite long and they're broken up into chapters. This chapter 2 start here. You can see that it's almost like, well, it's a small novel really. This story goes on with some pictures for a number of pages, and then another one will start almost immediately. So each story has maybe a couple of quite well drawn black and white pictures running through, and got a crossword here to break up and some puzzles to do. But the main emphasis here are stories for the ladies, and I kind of had a little bit of a look at the format of these stories. They never depicted any romance or anything like that. It was always solving some sort of mystery, and the main character would always be some young lady, maybe with a man as a secondary consideration, but it was always the young lady that was leading the story. A bit of period costume drama here with this story. And that's really, I mean, if I flip through the pages quite quickly, we've got a little maze a quiz here sort of thing. But that's the format, is black and white stories, all text, no real comic strips at all. And this seemed to be the format of annuals up until Girl came along and introduced the concept of a mixture of text stories like this and comic strips mixed together. I certainly know which annual I would have preferred out of the Girl or the Girl Crystal. A lot of reading here, certainly a lot of content as far as small novel sort of type stories were concerned. And that's it. Even the back cover is the last page of a story, and on the back cover there's kind of another maze thing, an advert for Cadbury's Bourneville cocoa. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane for you ladies out there. I'm sure it was probably more interesting to the ladies than the men, but I wanted to complete that little cycle of the annuals that were produced by Reverend Marcus Morris through Halton Press in London. And just an aside, I did discover there's not much information online about these annuals, but Girls Crystal, we looked at that and its format. In 1953, so a couple of years after this one came out, the comic and the annuals took a different stance, and they started to introduce comic strips into Girls Crystal. So if what you've seen doesn't look like what you saw way back, then it's because the format changed, and I suspect that was all due to the Eagle Annual and what that was doing, and the other comics and annuals just followed suit, because Eagle and the other comics and annuals that came out of that stable were very successful, and I suspect the other annuals and comics wanted to follow suit. So that's where things changed, probably about the mid-50s, and then of course into the kind of traditional comics that that we saw after that, mainly just strip cartoons probably. Anyway, so I've got a little bit of a teaser for you. What's coming up in the next few weeks? I'm going to open this box. It's locked. It's a money box. And this box has not been opened for 50 years. I found it in the loft, along with another box, a similar box, that's also locked. I don't know where the key is. I had it as a child. It's got things in there. I think I know, well, I do know more or less what's in there, but we are going to open this up together and see what's inside. But that's to come. So you better subscribe to this channel or you're going to miss it. So that's it from me for the time being. I'll see you on the next video. Keep well and bye for now. Bye.